A single letter, embossed with a name she had spent 5 years trying to forget, shattered Madeline Hayes's carefully constructed peace. The name was Davenport. To the world it meant old money, power, and prestige. To Madeline, it meant a shattered heart and a life of unanswered questions. Her husband, Ethan Davenport, had walked out on her without a word, leaving her pregnant and alone. Now he was dead, and she, the abandoned wife, was being summoned to the reading of his will. She would have to face his formidable family, the people who had cast her out like trash, with her 5-year-old twins in tow, her poverty a stark contrast to their unimaginable wealth. She expected nothing but humiliation. She was walking into the lion's den, armed with nothing but her dignity. But what she would find there wasn't just a will. It was a final, devastating secret that would either destroy them all or finally set her free. The flimsy paper felt heavy in Madeline's hand, its sharp edges a stark contrast to the soft, worn fabric of her son's pajamas. Leo was asleep on her lap, his small chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm that had been her anchor for 5 long years. His twin sister, Lily, was curled at the other end of the threadbare sofa, a crayon still clutched in her hand, her latest masterpiece, a wobbly, rainbow-colored sun, taped to the wall above her head. This small 2-bedroom apartment, with its mismatched furniture and the lingering scent of lavender-scented cleaner, was their world. It was a world Madeline had built from the ashes of a life she no longer recognized as her own. A life of galas, of sprawling estates with manicured lawns, of a man whose smile could light up a room, but whose eyes held a sadness she could never quite reach. Ethan Davenport. The name on the law firm's letterhead, Finchley, Moore and Associates, was one she knew well. It was the firm that had handled the Davenport family's affairs for generations. The crisp, impersonal type informed her of the passing of her husband, Ethan Charles Davenport, and requested her presence for the reading of his last will and testament. Husband. The word was a bitter pill. Legally, it was true. In the chaotic aftermath of his disappearance, divorce had been a luxury she couldn't afford and an emotional ordeal she couldn't face. So she had remained Mrs. Davenport in name only, a ghost haunting a marriage that had ended without a funeral. He had vanished 5 years ago. There was no fight, no dramatic exit. One Tuesday morning, he kissed her forehead, told her he loved her, and walked out the door of their lavish penthouse to go to work. He never came back. His car was found at a private airfield. His accounts were untouched. He had simply ceased to exist. The Davenport family, led by their iron-willed matriarch, Beatrice, had closed ranks immediately. Their narrative was swift and brutal. Madeline, the girl from the wrong side of the tracks, the charity case Ethan had foolishly married, must have driven him away. Her demands, her instability, her unsuitability for their world, it was all her fault. When a month later, a terrified, newly pregnant Madeline had reached out to them for help, Beatrice's voice on the phone had been like ice chipping at stone. "You will not tarnish my son's name with your lies, you pathetic little gold digger. Whatever mess you've made, you will handle it on your own. The Davenport family is done with you." The line had gone dead, and with it, any hope Madeline had of support. She had been left with nothing. The penthouse was in Ethan's name. The accounts were frozen. She had been escorted out by security with a single suitcase and the clothes on her back. Now this, a summons, a legal obligation to face the people who had erased her from their history. Her first instinct was to throw the letter away, to pretend it never came. Why endure the humiliation? But then she looked at her children, Leo with Ethan's dark, wavy hair, and Lily with his thoughtful, deep-set gray eyes. They were a part of him. They deserved... What? She wasn't even sure. But they were the reason she had survived, the reason she worked 2 jobs, juggling shifts as a waitress and a freelance graphic designer, fueled by caffeine and a fierce protective love. They deserved more than a life of scraping by. "Sophie, it's me," she said, her voice trembling slightly as her best friend picked up the phone. "Maddie, you okay? You sound like you've seen a ghost." Madeline let out a shaky laugh. "You could say that. I just got a letter. Ethan, he's dead." Silence stretched on the other end of the line, thick and heavy. Sophie had been her rock, the one who had held her as she sobbed, who had bought the first box of diapers, who had babysat at a moment's notice so Madeline could take an extra shift. "Oh, Maddie, I'm so sorry," Sophie said finally, her voice soft with a complex mix of sympathy and old anger. "How are you feeling?" "I don't know," Madeline admitted, tracing the embossed crest on the letter. "Numb, angry, and scared. They want me at the reading of the will." "What? After all this time? After how they treated you?" "It's a legal summons. I think I have to go." "Then you'll walk in there with your head held high," Sophie said, her voice turning fierce. "You and those beautiful kids are a testament to everything you've overcome. Don't let them see you falter. Not for a second." The day of the reading arrived under a sky the color of slate. Madeline dressed in her only formal outfit, a simple navy blue dress she'd bought at a consignment shop years ago. It was clean, respectable, and a world away from the designer labels she used to wear. She braided Lily's hair and helped Leo with the buttons on his little collared shirt. They were too young to understand the gravity of the day, but they could sense their mother's tension. "Are we going to a castle, Mommy?" Lily asked, her eyes wide as they stood before the monolithic granite and glass building that housed the law firm. "No, sweetie, just a big office building," Madeline said, forcing a smile as she took their small hands in hers. The doorman in his long coat eyed her worn shoes and the children's simple attire with a flicker of disdain before pulling open the heavy glass door. The elevator ride to the 50th floor was silent and suffocating. The air was different up here, thinner, scented with money and power. When the doors opened, they stepped into a reception area that was larger than their entire apartment. Polished marble floors, abstract art on the walls, and a view of the city that stretched to the horizon. "Madeline Hayes," she said to the receptionist, her voice barely a whisper. "I have an appointment with Mr. Alistair Finchley." The receptionist's polite smile tightened almost imperceptibly as she recognized the name. "Of course, the Davenport party is waiting in the main conference room. Down the hall to your right." The Davenport party. Of course. She wasn't one of them. She was the opposition. Taking a deep breath, Madeline squeezed her children's hands. "Stay close to Mommy, okay? And be very quiet." She pushed open the heavy mahogany door and stepped into the lion's den. The conference room was just as intimidating as she'd imagined. A long, dark wood table dominated the space. Polished to a mirror shine, floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic, godlike view of the city below. A city that had once felt like her playground and now felt like a constant reminder of her struggles. And at the table sat the Davenports. Beatrice was at the head, a queen on her throne. Her silver hair was coiffed into a perfect, immovable helmet. She wore a Chanel suit the color of blood, and her eyes, when they landed on Madeline, were chips of Arctic ice. Beside her sat Ethan's younger brother, Gregory. He had the same handsome Davenport features as Ethan, but they were twisted by an expression of permanent smugness and entitlement. His gaze raked over Madeline and the children with open contempt. A few other faces were scattered around the table, a stern-looking aunt, a weak-chinned cousin, all of them turning to stare, their expressions a mixture of shock and disgust. The silence was a weapon, and they wielded it expertly. Madeline could feel her face flush, the humiliation coiling in her stomach. She felt the urge to turn and flee, to snatch her children away from these cold, cruel people. But then she felt a small tug on her hand. Lily was looking up at her, her brow furrowed with concern. That small gesture was enough. Madeline straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and met Beatrice's glare head-on. "Beatrice! Gregory!" she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Gregory scoffed, leaning back in his chair. "I can't believe you have the nerve to show your face here, and to drag them along with you." He gestured dismissively at the twins, who had instinctively hidden behind Madeline's legs. "They are Ethan's children," Madeline said, her voice dangerously quiet. "They have more right to be here than anyone." "Allegedly," Beatrice cut in, her voice a low, venomous drawl. "We only have your word for that, a word that has proven to be worth absolutely nothing." The cruelty of the statement stole Madeline's breath. For 5 years, they had never once asked about the children, never sent a card, never made a single attempt to see their own grandchildren. To them, Leo and Lily were not family. They were ammunition to be used against her. Before Madeline could respond, the door at the far end of the room opened, and a man in a perfectly tailored gray suit entered. He was older, with thinning white hair and a kind, weary face. This was Alistair Finchley, the family's longtime attorney and the executor of Ethan's will. "Mrs. Davenport," he said, his voice a calm and professional balm in the toxic atmosphere. He nodded at her, and his eyes lingered for a moment on the children with a flicker of something unreadable. Sympathy, perhaps? "Please have a seat." He gestured to 3 empty chairs at the far end of the table, as far away from the family as possible. It was a deliberate act of isolation. Madeline guided the children to the chairs, settling them down with a quiet word and a small coloring book she had brought in her oversized purse. Mr. Finchley took his seat at the head of the table opposite Beatrice. He placed a thick, leather-bound portfolio in front of him and cleared his throat. "We are gathered today for the reading of the last will and testament of Ethan Charles Davenport, executed on the 3rd of March, 2020. Madeline's heart stuttered. March 3rd, 2020. That was just 1 week before he disappeared. He had written a new will a week before he left her. What could it possibly say? Gregory leaned forward, a predatory gleam in his eye. "Let's get on with it, Alistair. Some of us have companies to run. We all know what it's going to say." Ethan knew his duty to the family. He shot a triumphant smirk at Madeline. The implication was clear. The Davenport empire would go to him, the rightful heir, and she would be left with nothing. Mr. Finchley opened the portfolio, his expression unreadable. "As you all know, Ethan was a meticulous man. The will is comprehensive. I will begin with the minor bequests." He droned on for what felt like an eternity. A vintage watch to a former college roommate, a donation to the university library, a generous trust fund for the longtime family housekeeper. With each bequest, the tension in the room grew thicker. The Davenports sat impatiently, waiting for the main event. Madeline tried to keep her breathing even, focusing on the soft scratching of Lily's crayon on the paper. Finally, Mr. Finchley paused and looked up, his gaze sweeping over the expectant faces. "Now," he said, his voice dropping slightly, "we come to the disposition of the primary assets. This includes all shares in Davenport Industries, the full portfolio of real estate holdings, all liquid assets, trusts, and personal effects. The residual of the estate." Gregory physically sat up straighter, a smug smile playing on his lips. Beatrice allowed herself a small, reptilian curve of the lips. This was it. The confirmation of their victory. Mr. Finchley took a deep, deliberate breath. He looked directly at Madeline, a strange, almost warning look in his eyes. "Article 4 of the will reads as follows," he announced, his voice ringing with formal authority in the silent room. "I, Ethan Charles Davenport, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare that the entirety of my residual estate, without exception or condition, I leave to my sole and primary heir." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. The anticipation was a palpable thing, a living entity in the room. Mr. Finchley looked down at the document one last time, then lifted his head. His eyes, clear and unwavering, found Madeline's across the vast, polished expanse of the table. "I leave it all," he read, his voice clear and resolute, "to my beloved wife, Madeline Hayes Davenport." For a full 5 seconds, the only sound in the room was the faint hum of the building's ventilation system and the soft scratching of Lily's green crayon. The words hung in the air, seemingly disconnected from reality. Madeline stared at Mr. Finchley, her mind unable to process the statement. It had to be a mistake, a cruel, elaborate joke. Then the world exploded. "What?" The roar came from Gregory, who shot to his feet so violently his chair screeched backward and slammed into the credenza behind him. His face was a mask of purple fury, his handsome features contorted into an ugly snarl. "That's impossible. It's a fraud. She forged it." Beatrice didn't shout. Her reaction was far more chilling. She went perfectly still, her face draining of all color until it was a waxy, kabuki-like mask. The only sign of her rage was the way her manicured fingers, laden with heavy gold rings, gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles turning bone white. "Alistair," she said, her voice lethally soft, "read that again. You must have made a mistake." Mr. Finchley did not flinch. He adjusted his glasses and looked at her coolly. "There is no mistake, Beatrice. The language is unequivocal. To my beloved wife, Madeline Hayes Davenport, I leave the entirety of my estate. She is to be the sole beneficiary and executor of my final wishes." He turned a page. "It further stipulates that in the event of her death, the estate passes in its entirety, in trust, to her children, Leo Hayes Davenport and Lily Hayes Davenport." He had named them. He had known their names. The thought hit Madeline like a physical blow, knocking the air from her lungs. How could he have known their names? She had named them months after he was gone. The room started to spin. Leo, sensing his mother's distress, crawled into her lap, his small arms wrapping around her waist. "This is an outrage," Gregory bellowed, pacing behind his chair like a caged animal. "She manipulated him. She must have blackmailed him into signing this before she drove him away. We will contest this. We will drag her through every court in the country. We will prove she is an unfit mother, a scheming harlot who—" "That is enough, Gregory." Mr. Finchley's voice cut through the tirade like a whip. For the first time, his professional calm was gone, replaced by a steely authority. "This will was signed by Ethan in my presence. It was witnessed by two of my partners. He underwent a full psychological evaluation the day before signing, a measure he insisted upon to ensure there could be no question of his mental state. The will is ironclad." Beatrice finally rose to her feet, her movements slow and deliberate, like a predator uncoiling. She ignored her son's tantrum and fixed her icy gaze on Madeline. "You will not see a single penny of my family's money," she hissed, the words dripping with venom. "You think you have won? This is not over. This is just the beginning. I will strip you of everything. I will take those children from you. You will end up back in the gutter where you belong, and you will have nothing. I promise you that." The raw, undisguised hatred in her voice was terrifying. But something inside Madeline, something that had been dormant for 5 years, began to stir. The shock was receding, replaced by a slow-burning ember of anger. For 5 years, this woman had let her struggle, had allowed her own grandchildren to live in poverty, all while sitting atop an empire. And now, faced with Ethan's final wish, her only thought was to destroy her. Madeline stood up, holding Leo tightly. She pulled Lily close with her other hand. She was trembling, but she met her mother-in-law's gaze without flinching. "Your family's money?" Madeline's voice was quiet, but it carried across the room. "According to this, it's my money now. It's my children's money, and I will not let you threaten us." A flicker of genuine surprise crossed Beatrice's face, as if a kitten had just roared like a lion. Gregory just laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "You hear that, Mother? She's got some fight in her. It won't last. We'll see you in court. You and your bastards." "Mr. Davenport!" Mr. Finchley's voice was sharp with reprimand. The atmosphere was thick with hate, so suffocating that Madeline felt she couldn't breathe. She needed to get her children out of there. "Mr. Finchley," she said, turning to the lawyer, "is my presence still required?" "No, Mrs. Davenport. That concludes the reading," he said, his expression softening as he looked at her and the children. "My office will be in touch to begin the probate process. There are a great many things to discuss." He walked her to the door, a silent barrier between her and the seething Davenports. As she reached the hallway, he discreetly pressed a small, heavy object into her hand. It was a key, an old-fashioned, ornate skeleton key. "Ethan left this for you as well," he murmured, his voice too low for anyone else to hear. "Along with a sealed envelope, he instructed me to give them to you only if you were present at the reading. He said you would know what to do." Madeline looked from the key to the lawyer's tired eyes. What did it mean? Before she could ask, he had retreated back into the conference room, closing the door on the angry shouts that had already resumed inside. She stood in the silent, opulent hallway, her children clinging to her legs. In one hand, she held a key to an unknown lock. In the other, a simple manila envelope. Her entire world had been turned upside down in the space of 10 minutes. She was no longer just a struggling, single mother. She was the sole heir to the Davenport fortune, and she was in more danger than she had ever been in her life. The taxi ride back to her apartment was a blur. The city lights smeared past the window, but Madeline saw none of it. She was in a state of profound shock, her mind a whirlwind of confusion, fear, and a strange, budding hope. The twins, exhausted by the tension of the morning, had fallen asleep, their heads resting on her lap. Their innocent, peaceful faces were a stark contrast to the turmoil raging inside her. Once inside her small apartment, the reality of her situation began to sink in. She laid the sleeping children in their beds, tucking them in with a tenderness that belied the tremor in her hands. Then she went to the kitchen, made herself a cup of tea she didn't drink, and sat at her small cluttered table. On the table lay the two items from Mr. Finchley, the heavy ornate key and the thick, sealed envelope. Her name was written on the front in Ethan's familiar, elegant script. Her heart ached seeing it. It felt like a message from a ghost. With trembling fingers, she broke the wax seal and pulled out a sheaf of heavy cream-colored paper. It was a letter, several pages long, filled with his handwriting. She took a deep, shaky breath and began to read. My dearest Madeline, if you are reading this, it means I have failed. It means I am gone, and I never had the chance to come back to you and explain. I can only imagine the pain, the confusion, and the anger you must feel. For 5 years, I have lived with the knowledge of what I did to you, and it has been a torment beyond measure. Please, before you judge me completely, allow me to try and explain the impossible truth. I did not leave you. I sent you away. It was the hardest, most cruel thing I have ever done, and it was the only way I knew how to save your life. Madeline's hand flew to her mouth, a sob catching in her throat. She read on, her eyes flying across the page. About a month before I disappeared, I stumbled upon something, a discrepancy in the company's finances. I thought it was a simple accounting error, but the deeper I dug, the uglier it became. My father, before he died, had gotten himself into a dangerous partnership. He had borrowed money from truly terrible people to save the company during a downturn, and the debt was being paid back through a complex system of money laundering, hidden within the corporate structure of Davenport Industries. My brother Gregory and my mother knew all about it. In fact, after my father's death, they expanded the operation. They weren't just laundering money, Maddie. They were complicit in fraud, bribery, and activities that put lives at risk. The people they were in business with, they don't leave loose ends. When I confronted Gregory, he laughed at me. He told me I was a fool, that this was how the real world worked. He said I had a choice: play along and enjoy the wealth, or be removed. My mother was even colder. She told me my morality was a liability to the family legacy. She saw me as a threat. I realized they would never stop. And I knew that as my wife, you were in incredible danger. They would use you against me. If I went to the authorities, these partners of theirs would come after you. If I refused to cooperate, my own family would see you as leverage. I saw only one way out. I had to sever you from my life, completely and publicly. I had to make it look like I had abandoned you, make you so untouchable, so cast out, that no one would ever associate you with me or the family's business again. It had to be convincing, so I was cruel. I was silent. I walked away, hoping that their scorn for you would become your shield. The letter fell from her hands. Madeline staggered to her feet, pacing the small living room. It couldn't be true. The abandonment, the years of pain and struggle, the narrative she had built of a husband who had simply stopped loving her, it was all a lie. A terrible, calculated, and somehow loving lie. He hadn't left her. He had protected her. She picked up the pages again, tears blurring the words. I had a pilot I trusted fly me out of the country. I planned to gather my own evidence, build a case from the outside, and then come back for you. I thought it would take a year, maybe 2, but they were always one step ahead. They have powerful friends, Maddie. Every time I got close, they would find a way to block me. I lived in hiding, moving from city to city, always looking over my shoulder. And then, about a year after I left, through a private investigator I had hired to watch over you from a distance, I learned the most wonderful and terrible news. You had given birth to twins. To my children, my investigator sent me a photo. You were standing outside a small bakery, holding their hands. You looked so tired, but so beautiful. And they were perfect. Leo and Lily. Her breath hitched. He knew. He had known all along. Knowing about them changed everything. It doubled my resolve, but it also doubled my fear. The risk of coming back was too great. If anything happened to me, their network would trace it back to you. I couldn't let that happen. So I stayed away, a ghost watching my family from afar. I set up this will as my only remaining weapon. I knew my mother and brother would be watching my accounts. If I died, they would expect everything. By giving it all to you, I knew I would be putting a target on your back, but also giving you the power and resources to fight back. It was a terrible gamble, but the only one I had left. The key I left you is for a safe deposit box at the Sterling National Bank on Grant Avenue. The box is registered under the name Walter Page. Inside you will find everything. Ledgers, bank records, names, dates, all the evidence you need to expose them. Use it, Maddie. Take them down. Avenge what they did to our family, what they forced me to do. Protect our children and give them the life I couldn't. I don't know how my life will end. Perhaps they finally found me. Or maybe it was just a tragic, random accident. But know this, Madeline. Not a day went by that I didn't think of you. Every decision I made, every breath I took for the last 5 years was for you and for the children I never got to hold. The memory of your smile was the only light in my darkness. Forgive me and live well. Forever yours, Ethan. Madeline collapsed onto the sofa, the letter clutched to her chest and wept. She cried for the years of pain and misunderstanding. She cried for the husband she had loved and lost twice over. She cried for the terrible sacrifice he had made. And as the tears subsided, a new feeling began to take their place. Cold, hard, and clear as diamond. Rage. Beatrice and Gregory had not just stolen her husband. They had stolen her life, her happiness, and her children's father. They had built their empire on a foundation of crime and corruption, and they had been willing to sacrifice anyone, including their own family, to protect it. Ethan's last wish was not just a bequest, it was a mission. He had given her the will as a shield, the money as a weapon, and the key as the bullet. Her fight was just beginning. The next morning, Madeline woke with a clarity she hadn't felt in 5 years. The grief was still there, a heavy stone in her chest, but it was now overlaid with a steely resolve. Ethan's letter had reframed her past, turning a story of abandonment into a saga of sacrifice. It had also given her a purpose. Her first call was to the only lawyer she knew, a man named Robert Chen, who had offered her pro bono advice on a landlord dispute a few years back. He was a small-time lawyer with a cramped office, but he was sharp, tenacious, and most importantly, she trusted him. She met him at a small coffee shop, far from the prying eyes of the downtown corporate world. She slid a copy of Ethan's will and the letter across the table. As he read, his eyebrows climbed higher and higher. "My God, Madeline," he breathed, putting the pages down and staring at her, as if seeing her for the first time. This is the kind of thing you see in movies. Davenport Industries is a global giant. The family is practically royalty in this city. And it's built on a lie, Robert," she said, her voice firm. "Ethan died trying to expose it. I'm not going to let his sacrifice be for nothing. Beatrice and Gregory will have an army of lawyers, the best money can buy. They will try to paint you as a liar, a forger, an unstable gold digger. They'll use your past, your financial struggles, everything against you. I know, that's why I need you. I don't need a corporate shark. I need someone who will fight for the truth." Ethan left evidence. She showed him the ornate key. "It's in a safe deposit box. He said it's everything we need." Robert Chen looked at the key, then back at Madeline's determined face. A slow smile spread across his lips. An abandoned wife with secret twins inherits a billion-dollar fortune and a conspiracy to bring down a corrupt dynasty? Madeline, this isn't just a case. This is the case of a lifetime. I'm in. Their first move was a tactical one. Robert immediately filed a motion for an injunction to freeze all major assets of the Davenport estate, preventing Beatrice and Gregory from moving or hiding money while the probate process was underway. As expected, the Davenport legal team came back with a furious counter-motion to contest the will, citing undue influence and questioning Madeline's character. The battle lines were drawn. While the lawyers fired their initial salvos, Madeline's mission was more direct. She had to get to that safe deposit box. The Sterling National Bank was an old, formidable institution, its granite facade exuding an aura of quiet, unbreachable security. Walking in felt like stepping back in time. She presented the key and the fake identification Ethan had apparently set up for her, under the name Walter Page, another detail he'd included in the letter's postscript. The bank manager, a prim man named Mr. Peterson, looked at the key, then at the file, and then back at her. "The account for this box is flagged, madam," he said coolly. "We were to be notified of any activity. I need to make a phone call." Madeline's blood ran cold. Had Beatrice and Gregory already anticipated this? Was this a trap? She stood in the cavernous marble lobby for 10 agonizing minutes, her heart pounding against her ribs. Finally, Mr. Peterson returned, his expression unchanged. "Very well. Please follow me." He led her down to the vault, a massive circular door of polished steel standing open like the maw of a great beast. Inside, the air was cool and still. He used his own key in conjunction with hers, and a long, thin metal box slid out. "You may use one of the private viewing rooms," he said, gesturing to a small wood-paneled booth. With trembling hands, Madeline carried the box into the room and closed the door. She lifted the heavy lid. It wasn't filled with cash or jewels. It was filled with paper and electronics. There was a thick black ledger, its columns filled with Ethan's meticulous handwriting. It detailed dates, names of shell corporations, and staggering sums of money flowing in and out of hidden accounts. There were flash drives containing encrypted files and a small burner-style cell phone. She turned on the phone. It had only one contact stored in it, A. Finchley. Beneath that, there was a single, saved audio recording. Her breath hitched as she pressed play. First, she heard Gregory's voice, arrogant and dismissive. "You're being sentimental, Ethan. This is how the game is played. Dad knew it, and you need to learn it. These partners don't care about your moral compass." Then, Beatrice's voice, cold as a winter grave. "Your father built an empire. Your brother is securing it. Your only job is not to tear it down with your naive idealism. You will fall in line. Your wife, Madeline, she is a lovely girl. It would be a shame if her simple little life were to become complicated. Do you understand what I'm telling you, son?" It was a recording of the confrontation Ethan had described in his letter. He had recorded their threats. This was the proof. This was the smoking gun. Madeline carefully packed everything into her bag. The ledger, the drives, the phone. This was Ethan's legacy. It was his voice reaching out from beyond the grave, giving her the weapons she needed to finish his fight. As she left the bank, stepping out into the bright afternoon sun, she felt a sudden chill, a primal sense of being watched. Across the street, a black town car was parked. The windows were tinted, but she could just make out the silhouette of a man in the driver's seat. As she stared, the car pulled smoothly away from the curb and disappeared into traffic. It might have been a coincidence, but she knew it wasn't. They knew she had been there. The game had changed. This was no longer just a legal battle to be fought in a courtroom. They were hunting her now. The discovery of the evidence galvanized their small team. Robert Chen brought in a forensic accountant, a grizzled, no-nonsense woman named Maria Torres, who immediately dove into the encrypted files on the flash drives. What she found was a labyrinth of offshore accounts, fraudulent invoices, and illegal transactions that made the Davenport corporate empire look like a sophisticated criminal enterprise. "This is bigger than just money laundering," Maria said, pointing to a complex flowchart she had drawn on a whiteboard in Robert's office. "They were bribing port officials, falsifying customs declarations, and funding some very dangerous people." Ethan wasn't exaggerating. He was in over his head. While they worked to build their case, the Davenports launched their offensive. The siege was relentless and came from all sides. The tabloids were the first wave. Suddenly, anonymous sources were telling sordid stories about Madeline. She was an unstable gold digger who had trapped Ethan into marriage. She had cheated on him. The twins weren't his. The headlines were vicious, designed to shred her reputation and paint her as an unfit mother. Next came the legal harassment. Child Protective Services showed up at her door, citing an anonymous tip about neglect. It was a baseless, terrifying ordeal that left Madeline shaken and her children confused. They were trying to break her, to prove Beatrice's threat that she would take the children. Then came the surveillance. The black town car became a constant presence, parked down the street from her apartment, following her when she took the kids to the park. It was a blatant act of intimidation, a constant reminder that they were watching her every move. Madeline was terrified, but she refused to break. Every attack only strengthened her resolve. She was no longer just fighting for an inheritance. She was fighting for her children's safety and for Ethan's memory. She moved into Sophie's spare bedroom, a place where she felt safer and less isolated. The pressure was immense, but an unexpected ally emerged. Mr. Finchley, the stoic family lawyer, requested a private meeting. They met in a quiet corner of the city's botanical garden, far from any listening ears. "I was Ethan's lawyer, but he was also my friend," Mr. Finchley began, his professional mask finally slipping to reveal a deep-seated sadness. "I watched him grow up. I knew he was a good man trapped in a corrupt system. When he came to me to draw up that will, he told me everything. He made me promise to help you if the time ever came. He explained that he had been playing a long, dangerous game from within the Davenport camp. He was their lawyer, privy to their strategy, but his true loyalty was to Ethan's final wishes. They are planning to file for emergency guardianship of the children, claiming you are mentally unstable and financially incapable," he warned her. "They have a judge on their payroll. They are also preparing to move a significant amount of untraceable assets overseas. They are liquidating their leverage." This was the information they needed. Robert could now prepare a counter-strategy. Mr. Finchley was their inside man. The final confrontation happened not in a courtroom, but in the sterile hallway outside a family court hearing for the guardianship motion. Madeline was waiting for Robert when Beatrice and Gregory cornered her. "This is your last chance," Gregory sneered, blocking her path. "Drop this ridiculous claim to the will, sign over the estate to the family, and we will let you disappear with your brats. We'll even give you a small stipend for your trouble." Madeline looked him dead in the eye. "The time for deals is over, Gregory." Beatrice stepped forward, her face a mask of cold fury. "You foolish girl. Do you have any idea what you're up against? I built that empire with my husband. It is my legacy. I will not let a little tramp from the gutter and her bastard children destroy it." The word bastard was the final straw. All the fear Madeline had been carrying for weeks ignited into pure, cleansing rage. "Don't you dare talk about my children," she said, her voice low and trembling with intensity. "You talk about legacy? Your legacy is fraud and corruption. Your legacy is threatening a woman to control your own son. I have the recording, Beatrice. I have the recording of you threatening me, threatening my life, to keep Ethan in line." The color drained from Beatrice's face. For the first time, Madeline saw a flicker of genuine fear in the matriarch's cold eyes. Gregory looked from his mother to Madeline, his smug confidence faltering. "You're bluffing," he stammered. "Am I?" Madeline held his gaze. "Ethan recorded everything. He knew exactly who you were. He knew you were so obsessed with your legacy that you would sacrifice your own son to protect it. Well, his legacy is the truth, and it's about to burn your world to the ground." She pushed past them, her head held high, leaving them standing stunned and silent in the hallway. She had drawn her sword. She had declared war. The final battle was at hand. Madeline walked away from Beatrice and Gregory, her footsteps echoing in the cold marble hallway of the courthouse. She did not look back. The tremor in her hands had been replaced by an icy calm, the kind that comes only when every bridge has been burned and the only path forward is through the fire. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach, but it was no longer in control. Her rage, sharpened by years of pain and injustice, was now a precision instrument. She met Robert Chen and Maria Torres in Robert's cramped, paper-strewn office later that night. The air was thick with the scent of stale coffee and high stakes. On the whiteboard, Maria's flowchart of the Davenport criminal enterprise looked like a spider's web. intricate and venomous. They tried to buy me off, Madeline said, her voice devoid of emotion. Then they threatened me again. They think I'm bluffing. Robert looked at her, his expression grim. Once we file this, Madeline, there is no going back. We're not just contesting a will. We're alerting federal authorities to a massive criminal conspiracy. You and the children will be at the center of a storm. Maria Torres, who had been silently reviewing a printout, looked up. The evidence is undeniable. The ledger, the encrypted transaction logs, and that recording, it's a kill shot. They won't just lose the company. They will go to prison for a very long time. Madeline looked from Robert's worried face to Maria's confident one. She thought of Ethan's letter, his years of lonely, fearful exile. She thought of Leo and Lily, asleep at Sophie's apartment. Their innocence, a sacred thing she had to protect. Beatrice and Gregory hadn't just committed crimes. They had poisoned a family, destroyed a good man, and tried to erase her children from existence. This was never just about money. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming the truth. Do it, she said, her voice quiet but unwavering. File it. Let the storm come. The next 48 hours were the longest of her life. She stayed with Sophie, the curtains drawn, jumping every time a car backfired on the street below. She didn't sleep. She watched her children play with blocks on the floor, their carefree laughter a painful counterpoint to the suffocating anxiety that gripped her. She was a witness on the verge of testifying, a soldier in a trench waiting for the whistle to blow. Every news alert on her phone made her heart leap into her throat. Was it them? Had they made a move against her? The news broke on a Tuesday morning. Madeline was making pancakes, trying to create a bubble of normalcy for the twins, when Sophie gasped from the living room. Maddie, you need to see this. On the television, a local news anchor was speaking with urgent gravity. Behind her, the screen showed live footage of the iconic Davenport Industries Tower. But instead of the usual flow of business people, the entrance was swarming with dark-suited federal agents. The bold headline at the bottom of the screen read, "Federal agents raid Davenport Industries headquarters." Madeline dropped the spatula. She moved towards the screen as if in a trance, her hand coming up to cover her mouth. It was real. It was happening. The cameras cut to a different feed. A shaky, long-lens shot of the sprawling Davenport estate in the countryside. A fleet of black SUVs was parked in the circular driveway. And then the front doors of the mansion opened. First came Gregory, his face purple with rage, shouting something indistinct at the reporters held back by a police line. He looked utterly stripped of his power, his expensive suit looking cheap and ill-fitting as his hands were cuffed behind his back. Then came Beatrice, the matriarch, the queen, the woman of unbreakable iron, looked diminished. Her perfect silver coif was slightly askew. Her face was a waxy, colorless mask of disbelief. There was no defiance in her eyes, only a hollow shock. As an agent gently guided her down the steps, her legendary composure finally shattered. Her knees seemed to buckle, and she stumbled, a small, pathetic movement that signaled the definitive end of an era. The empire of ice had melted. Madeline sank onto the sofa, a choked sob escaping her lips. It was a sound of profound relief, of grief, of 5 years of pent-up pain finally being released. Sophie wrapped an arm around her, holding her tightly as she wept. The story dominated the news cycle for weeks. The sordid details of the Davenport criminal enterprise, unearthed by Ethan and exposed by his widow, became a national sensation. The narrative had flipped completely. The tabloid lies about the unstable gold digger evaporated, replaced by the heroic tale of a courageous mother who honored her murdered husband's legacy by bringing a corrupt dynasty to its knees. Madeline was inundated with interview requests, all of which she refused. She had not done this for fame. She had done it for closure. With Beatrice and Gregory facing a mountain of federal charges, their assets frozen, their legal team in disarray, the contest of the will became a moot point. The probate court moved swiftly. In a quiet, anticlimactic hearing, a judge officially validated Ethan's last testament. Madeline Hayes Davenport was declared the sole, undisputed heir to the legitimate portions of the Davenport fortune. A few months later, on a crisp autumn afternoon, the city was a distant memory. Madeline stood on the porch of a small, sun-bleached house nestled in the dunes of a quiet coastal town. The only sounds were the rhythmic crash of waves and the happy shrieks of her children chasing seagulls on the sand. The air smelled of salt and freedom. The money, when it finally became hers, had felt like an abstract thing. She used it to create this new life, a life of simple peace that she and Ethan had once dreamed of. The rest she placed in a trust, to be managed by an ethical firm, for her children and for charitable causes Ethan would have believed in. She held a small, framed photo in her hands. It was the one the private investigator had sent to Ethan, the grainy picture of her, looking tired but determined, holding the hands of her one-year-old twins outside a small bakery. Mr. Finchley had found it in a box of Ethan's hidden personal effects. On the back, in his elegant, familiar script, were the words, "My reason for everything. I will see you again." Tears welled in her eyes, but they were not the bitter tears of sorrow she had cried for so long. They were tears of a deep, aching gratitude and of a final, peaceful goodbye. He had saved them. He had never truly left them. In the end, his love had been a more powerful legacy than all the Davenport money and power combined. "Mommy, look!" Leo shouted, his small legs pumping as he ran towards her across the sand. He held up a perfect, unbroken seashell, its pearlescent interior gleaming in the afternoon sun. "It's a treasure." Madeline knelt, a genuine, radiant smile reaching her eyes for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. She pulled him into a hug, wrapping her other arm around Lily, who had run up behind him. She breathed in the scent of their hair, of sunshine and sea salt. "Yes, my love," she whispered, kissing both their foreheads as she held them close. "It is." She had walked into that law office a broken and abandoned wife, defined by a man's absence. She had endured the scorn of his family, the judgment of the world, and the crushing weight of her own loneliness. But through it all, she had discovered a strength she never knew she possessed. She had walked out a warrior, armed with the truth, and had single-handedly reclaimed her family's future. Ethan had left her a fortune, but he had given her something far more valuable: a mission, a purpose, and the devastating, beautiful truth of his love. And now, under a wide-open sky, with her true treasures in her arms, she was finally ready to live. And so, Madeline's story comes to a close, not with an ending, but with a new beginning, forged in fire and truth. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest acts of love are the ones we don't understand until the very end. She fought through humiliation and fear, not for money, but for the honor of the man she loved and the future of the children he gave his life to protect. Her journey from a forgotten wife to a formidable force for justice shows the incredible strength that lies within us when we fight for what is right. What did you think of Madeline's incredible resilience? Do you believe Ethan made the right choice? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of love, sacrifice, and ultimate vindication moved you, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who appreciates a story of strength against all odds. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss another real-life drama that will touch your heart and keep you on the edge of your seat. Thank you for listening.